What's up, everyone? Welcome back. Today we are going over chapter 1 of Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell and Maltz. In the last video, we went over the preface. So today we are really going to be getting into the material, the meat and potatoes of this. Really understanding how to, this book is at the foundation of understanding your self-concept. And Maxwell and Maltz, his ideas have influenced and permeated the self-help industry, and many people that came after him, Jim Rohn, Brian Tracy, Tony Robbins, all the people in this arena. And even, these ideas also correlate with what Neville Goddard talks about, because Neville Goddard talks about the self-concept, the conception of self, and he's using the same language in here. These are just different ways of speaking about the same thing. This is going about this from a very psychological framework. And so this is really going to be valuable, like I said, in terms of on a very deep level, understanding the self-concept, understanding how it is governing your ability to create what you want in your life. And this book has had a profound impact on me. Without any further delay or introduction, let's just get into the material. The self-image. And again, self-image and self-concept are interchangeable. He's using the word self-image. They're both how you perceive yourself to be. So, self-image, the key to a better life. During the past decade, a revolution has been quietly going on in the fields of psychology, psychiatry, and medicine. New theories and concepts concerning the self have grown out of the work and findings of clinical psychologists, practicing psychiatrists, and cosmetic or so-called plastic surgeons. New methods growing out of these findings have resulted in rather dramatic changes in personality, health, and apparently even the basic abilities and talents. Chronic failures have become successful. F students have turned into straight A's. Pupils within a matter of days and with no extra tutoring. Shy, retiring, inhibited personalities have become happy and outgoing. Writing in the January 1959 issue of Cosmopolitan magazine, T.F. James summarizes the results obtained by various psychologists and MDs as follows. Understanding the psychology of the self can mean the difference between success, failure, love, and hate, bitterness, and happiness. Now, I just want to make a quick point, that is, I have this book. You can see right here that I read this book initially about 10 years ago, and I have different parts underlined. The whole book is, I've gone in and underlined the parts that I thought stood out to me. And I would really highly suggest that if you're following along with these videos, you either make notations in your own personal note file, or that you leave comments down below, or open up so that you can type down the important points that you want to make note of. Because in order to really get this information, he mentioned this in the preface, that we need to experience this information. It's not just this passive listening along that's going to ingrain it and imprint it so that we truly understand it on that deep level and begin to embody it. It's going to be done by engaging with the information. And he has practices, and we're going to go into those throughout the course of this series, that we can experience what he's talking about. He has different exercises that I'm going to guide us through as we go about this, but I just wanted to make that point real quick. The discovery of the real self can rescue a crumbling marriage, recreate a faltering career, transform victims of personality failure on another, and he has that in quotations. On another plane, discovering your real self means the difference between freedom and the compulsions of conformity. Your key to a better life. The most important psychological discovery of this century is the discovery of the self-image. Whether we realize it or not, each of us carries about with us a mental blueprint or picture of ourselves. It may be vague and ill-defined to our conscious gaze. In fact, it may not be consciously recognizable at all, but it is there, complete down to the last detail. This self-image is our own conception of the sort of person I am. It has been built up from our own beliefs about ourselves, but most of these beliefs about ourselves have unconsciously been formed from our past experiences, our successes and failures, our humiliations, our triumphs, and the way other people have reacted to us, especially in early childhood. From all these, we mentally construct a self or picture of a self, and this is all highlighted here. Once an idea or belief about ourselves goes into this picture, it becomes true. As far as we personally are concerned, We do not question its validity, but proceed to act upon it just as if it were true. The self-image becomes a golden key to living a better life because of two important discoveries. And all of this is highlighted. 1, all your actions, feelings, behavior, even your abilities are always consistent with this self-image. In short, you will act like the sort of person you conceive yourself to be. Not only this, but you literally cannot act otherwise. In spite of all your conscious efforts or willpower, the man who convinces himself to be a failure type person will find some way to fail in spite of all his good intentions or his willpower, even if opportunity is literally dumped into his lap. The person who conceives himself to be a victim of injustice, one who was meant to suffer, will invariably find circumstances to verify his opinions. This is why I speak so often about that scale of consciousness from Dr. David Hawkins, and that those feelings of victimhood, of shame, of blame, those are at the very, very bottom. And it's really unfortunate that in our current day culture, victimhood has been propagated as this almost virtuous thing, and it's not. It takes away your power. And like Maxwell Maltz is saying here, the person who conceives themselves to be a victim will invariably find circumstances to justify it. And that's extremely true, because just the fact of life, just the fact that we are born into this life, it doesn't matter if we were born with a proverbial golden spoon in our mouth, it doesn't matter if we had an amazing childhood, there will always be things, just because of the simple human condition of being a human on this planet, we will always have reasons and causes for suffering. There will always be reasons to slip into that victim role and say, hey, my parents did this, they didn't do this. And as soon as we take that on, now we're creating. It's becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. And the victim paradigm cannot exist without that persecutor, abuser. It doesn't exist without it. So as soon as we begin casting blame and shaming and guilting other people, anybody that does this is taking on that victim role. They're assuming that archetype, and they're going to play out that story, much like in a film role, the way that Tufty talks about, the way that a lot of spiritual teachers that we've been sharing here on the channel talk about. When you begin to adopt that, like he's saying, it can be no other way. And so when we really come to understand this, we can see how toxic these ideas are that are being shared, in our culture. That victimhood thinking, it's leading you down a road as soon as you begin to adopt that, where again, you are going to look what you are programmed for, like the RAS, right? That's why he's saying there's failure type personalities and success type personalities. There's health prone personalities. There are disease prone personalities, and it all goes in with what you're choosing to focus on. Let's get back to the material here, because maybe he'll go over more of this. But the self-image is a premise, a base or a foundation upon which your entire personality, your behavior, and even your circumstances are built. Because of our experiences seem to verify and thereby strengthen our self-images in a vicious or beneficent cycle, as the case may be, is set up. Exactly. That's what I was just saying, is that our circumstances will seem to perpetuate it. It's been proven that we take in there's billions of bits of information, like external stimulus. Our brain can't handle that much. So it filters out what we perceive, really which is filtered through the self-image, which he's talking about, the self-concept, to be what is relevant, what is irrelevant, right? So according to our beliefs that we hold about ourself and about ourself in relation to reality, which is what is getting at the heart of the self-concept, the self-image here, we are only going to tune in. Our RAS is primed now to seek only information which agrees, that is in accordance with our self-concept, which is our filtration system for information. So, for example, a schoolboy who sees himself as a F-type student, or one who is dumb in mathematics, will invariably find that his report card bears him out. He then has proof. Right? A young girl who has an image of herself as the sort of person nobody likes will find indeed that she is avoided at the school dance. She literally invites rejection. her woe-begone expression, her hangdog manner, her over-anxiousness to please, or perhaps her unconscious hostility towards those she anticipates will affront her. This is so well said. I love the way that, sometimes like these older books, people don't want to read them because of this old-time type language, but you can see the way that is written. Every word is has. I like how he uses the word affront, because that affront, it encapsulates what I've spoken about much on this channel, which is that fight or flight that we get into as human beings. It's almost like by focusing on these negative aspects of ourselves, of our reality, which we're getting programmed to do, everything becomes an affront, and everything becomes cause then to engage in that fight or flight behavior. And what he's saying here is that if she, like, by her expecting that, because she anticipates it, it's showing up in little micro things that she's doing. Her woe-begone expression, her hangdog manner, and maybe in her unconscious hostility towards those she anticipates to affront her. And you can see this happening so much that people have these walls up, people have this overbearing defense mechanism, which then cause them to express hostility. All act to drive away those whom she would attract. In the same manner, a salesman or a businessman will also find that his actual experiences tend to prove his self-image correct. Because of this objective proof, it is very seldom occurs to a person that his trouble lies in his self-image or his own evaluation of himself. Tell the schoolboy that he only thinks he cannot master algebra, and he will doubt your sanity. He has tried, and still his report card tells the story. Tell the salesman that it is only an idea that he cannot earn more than a certain figure, and he can prove you wrong by his order book. He knows only too well how hard he has tried and failed. Yet, as we shall see later, almost miraculous changes have occurred both in grades of students and in the earning capacity of salesmen when they were prevailed upon to change their self-images. 2. The self-image can be changed. Numerous case histories have shown that one is never too young nor too old to change his self-image and thereby start to live a new life. One of the reasons it has seemed so difficult for a person to change their habits, personality, way of life, has been that heretofore nearly all efforts at change have been directed to the circumstances of the self, so to speak, rather than the center. Numerous patients, this is really going along in line with what Neville Goddard talks about, right? Instead of changing the external, instead of trying to change the 3D, it's changing the inner world. Numerous patients have said to me something like the following: if you were talking about positive thinking, I've tried that before and it just doesn't work for me. However, a little questioning invariably brings out that these individuals have employed positive thinking or attempted to employ it either upon particular external circumstances or upon some particular habit or character defect. I will get the job. I will be more calm and relaxed in the future. This business venture will turn out right for me, etc. But they had never thought to change their thinking of the self, which was to accomplish these things. This is why I talk about how those blanket affirmations, those more vague intentions that everybody likes me, everybody loves me, I'm worthy of love, are oftentimes going to be more powerful for you, especially if you don't already have that baseline foundation, than SP so-and-so loves me, or I have X job, or I X amount of money in the bank. If you're going for those external things, like Maxwell Maltz is saying, you're not changing your conception of yourself. Your conception of yourself is in opposition to this thing that you're claiming, and so therefore it's resistant, it's canceling itself out. Jesus warned us of the folly of putting a patch of new material upon an old garment, or of putting new wine into old bottles. Positive thinking cannot be used effectively as a patch or a crutch to the same self-image. In fact, it is literally impossible to think about a particular situation as long as you hold a negative concept of self. And numerous experiments have shown that once the concept of self is changed, other things consistent with the new concept of self are accomplished easily and without strain. And this is why I have, down below in all my videos, I have that free ebook that I've created that is going into the root limiting beliefs, that are, they are about your self-concept. Your limiting beliefs are about your concept of self. Figuring out what they are, uprooting them, replacing them with positive beliefs, because when I did that work myself, when I discovered it, it made a huge impact on me. And I discovered it around, a similar time frame that I first got into this book, that I started marking up this book here. So definitely check that out. It's free to download down below. Right, okay, so one of the earliest and most convincing experiments along this line was conducted by the late Prescott Leckey, one of the pioneers in self-image psychology. Leckey conceived that the personality as a system of ideas, all of which must seem to be consistent with each other. Ideas which are inconsistent with the system are rejected, not believed, or acted upon. Ideas which seem to be consistent with the system are accepted. At the very center of this system of ideas, the keystone, the base upon which all else is built, is the individual's ego ideal, or self-image, self-conception of himself. Leckey was a school teacher and had an opportunity to test his theory upon thousands of students. Leckey theorized that if a student had trouble learning a certain subject, it would be because, from the student's point of view, it would be inconsistent for him to learn it. Leckey believed, however, that if you could change the student's self-conception, which underlies this viewpoint, the attitude toward the subject would change accordingly. If the student could be induced to change his self-definition, his learning ability should also change. This proved to be the case. One student who misspelled 55 words out of 100 and flunked so many subjects that he lost credit for a year made a general average of 91 the next year and became one of the best spellers in school. A boy who was dropped from one of college because of the poor grades entered Columbia and became a straight A student. A girl who had flunked Latin 4 times after 3 talks with the school counselor finished with a grade of 84. A boy who was told by a testing bureau that he had no aptitude for English won honorable mention the next year for a literary prize. The trouble with these students was not that they were dumb or lacking in basic aptitudes. The trouble was an inadequate self-image. I don't have a mathematical mind. I'm just naturally a poor speller. They identified with their mistakes and failures. Instead of saying, I failed that test, which is factual and descriptive, they concluded that I am a failure. Instead of saying, I flunked that subject, they say, I am a flunk out. For those who are interested in learning more of Leckey's work, I recommend securing a copy of his book, Self-Consistency, A Theory of Personality. Leckey also used the same method to cure students of such habits as nail biting and stuttering. My own files contain case histories just as convincing. A man who was so afraid of strangers, he seldom ventured out of his house, and now makes a living as a public speaker. The salesman who had already prepared a letter of resignation because he just wasn't cut out for selling. And 6 months later, he was the number one man on a force of 100 salesmen. The minister who was considering retirement because of nerves and the pressure of preparing a sermon a week were getting him down. And now delivers an average of 3 outside talks a week, in addition to his weekly sermons, and doesn't have a nerve in his body. How a plastic surgeon became interested in self-image psychology. Offhand, there seemed to be little or no connection between surgery and psychology, but it was the work of plastic surgery which first hinted at the existence of the self-image and raised certain questions which led important psychological knowledge. When I first began the practice of plastic surgery, I was amazed by the dramatic and sudden changes in character and personality which often resulted when a facial defect was corrected. Changing the physical image in many instances appeared to create an entirely new person. In case after case, the scalpel that I held in my hand became a magic wand that not only transformed the patient's appearance, but his whole life. The shy and retiring became bold and courageous. A moronic, stupid boy changed into an alert, bright youngster who went on to become an executive with a prominent firm. A salesman who had lost his touch and his faith in himself became a model of self-confidence. And perhaps the most startling of all was the habitual hardened criminal who changed almost overnight from an incorrigible who had never shown any desire to change into a model prisoner who won a parole and went on to assume a responsible role in society. Some 20 years ago, I reported many such case histories in my book, New Faces, New Futures. Following its publication, similar articles in leading magazines, I was besieged with questions by criminologists, sociologists, and psychiatrists. They asked me questions that I could not answer, but they did start me upon a search. Strangely enough, I learned as much, if not from my failures, as from my successes. It was so easy to explain the successes. The boy with the 2 big ears who had been told he looked like a taxi cab with both doors open. He had been ridiculed all his life, often cruelly. Association with playmates meant humiliation and pain. Why shouldn't he avoid social contacts? Why shouldn't he become afraid of people and retire into himself? Terribly afraid to express himself in any way, it was no wonder he became known as a moron. When his ears were corrected, it would seem only natural that the cause of his embarrassment and humiliation been removed, that he should assume a normal role in life, which he did. Or considered the salesman who suffered a facial disfigurement as the result of a car accident. Each morning when he shaved, he could see the horrible disfiguring scar on his cheek, the grotesque twist in his mouth. For the first time in his life, he became painfully self-conscious. He was ashamed of himself, felt that his appearance must be repulsive to others. The scar became an obsession, and he was different from other people. He began to wonder what others were thinking of him. Soon his ego was even more mutilated than his face. He began to lose confidence in himself. He became bitter and hostile. Soon, almost all his attention was directed towards himself, the primary goal to protect his ego and the avoidance of situations which might bring humiliation. It's easy to understand how the correction of his face would bring an overnight change to his entire attitude and outlook, his feelings about himself, and result in greater success in his work. But what about the exceptions who didn't change? The Duchess, who all her life had been terribly shy and self-conscious because of a tremendous hump in her nose. Although surgery gave her a classic nose and face that was truly beautiful, she still continued to act the part of the ugly duckling, the unwanted sister who could never bring herself to look another human being in the eye. If the scalpel itself was magic, why did it not work on the Duchess? Or what about all the others who acquired new faces but went right on wearing the same old personality? Or how to explain the reaction of the people who insist the surgery made no difference whatsoever in their appearance? Every plastic surgeon has had this experience and probably been as baffled by it as I was. No matter how drastic the change in appearance may be, there are certain patients who will insist that I look just the same as before. You didn't do a thing. Friends, even family may scarcely recognize them, may become enthusiastic over their newly acquired beauty, yet the patient herself insists she can only see slight or no improvement, or in fact deny that any change has been made. Comparison of before and after photographs does little good except possibility to arouse hostility. By some strange mental alchemy, the patient will rationalize, of course, I can see the hump is no longer my nose, but it looks just the same. Or the scar may not show anymore, but it's still there. Scars that bring pride instead of shame. Still another clue in the search for the elusive self-image was that not all scars or disfigurements bring shame and humiliation. When I was a young medical student in Germany, I saw many other students proudly wearing his saber scar, much as an American might wear a Medal of Honor. The duelists, where the elite of college society had a facial scar, was the badge that proved you were a member in good standing. To these boys, the acquisition of a horrible scar on the cheek had the same psychological effect as the eradication of the scar on the cheek of my salesman patient. In old New Orleans, a Creole wore an eye patch in much the same way. I began to see that the knife itself had no magical powers. It could be used on one person to inflict a scar and on another to erase a scar, with the same psychological results. The mystery of imaginary ugliness. To a person handicapped by genuine congenital defect or suffering from an actual facial disfigurement as a result of accident, plastic surgery can indeed seemingly perform magic. From such cases, it would be easy to theorize that the cure-all for all neurosis, unhappiness, fear, anxiety, lack of self-confidence would be wholesale plastic surgery to remove all bodily defects. However, according to this theory, persons with normal or acceptable faces should be singularly free from all psychological handicaps. They should be cheerful, happy, self-confident, free from anxiety and worry, and we know this is not true. We know all too well this is not true. Nor can such a theory explain people who visit the office of a surgeon and demand a facelift to cure a purely imaginary ugliness. There are 35 or 45-year-old women who are convinced they look old, even though their appearance is perfectly normal, and in many cases, unusually attractive. There are young girls who are convinced that they are ugly merely because their mouth, nose, or bust measurement does not exactly match their currently reigning movie queen. There are men who believe that their ears are too big, nose is too long. No plastic surgeon would even consider operating upon these people, but unfortunately, the quacks, or so-called beauty doctors, who no medical association will admit membership to, have no such qualms. Such imaginary ugliness is not at all uncommon. A recent survey of college co-eds showed that 90% were dissatisfied in some way with their appearance. The words normal or average mean anything at all. It is obvious that 90% of our population cannot be abnormal or different or defective in appearance. Yet similar surveys have shown that approximately the same percentage of our general population find some reason to be ashamed of their body image. And it's probably this is probably much worse now than at the time that he wrote this, due to social media and everything else. These people react just as if they suffered an actual disfigurement. They feel the same shame. They develop the same fears and anxieties. Their capacity to really live fully is blocked and choked by the same sort of psychological roadblocks. Their scars, though mental and emotional rather than physical, are just as debilitating. The self-image, the real secret. Discovery of the self-image explains all the apparent discrepancies we've been discussing. The secret is this: to really live, that is to find life reasonably satisfying, you must have an adequate and realistic self-image that you can live with. You must find yourself acceptable to you. You must have a wholesome self-esteem. You must have a self that you can trust and believe in. You must have a self that you are not ashamed to be, and one that you can feel free to express creatively rather than to hide or cover up. You must have a self that corresponds to a reality so that you can function effectively in a real world. You must know yourself, both your strengths and your weaknesses, and be honest with yourself concerning both. Your self-image must be a reasonable approximation of you being neither more than you are nor less than you are. When this self-image is intact and secure, you feel good. When it is threatened, you feel anxious and insecure. When it is adequate and one that you can be wholesomely proud of, you feel self-confident. You feel yourself to be yourself and to express yourself. You function at your optimum. When it is an object of shame, you attempt to hide it rather than express it. Creative expression is blocked. You become hostile and hard to get along with. If a scar on the face enhances the self-image, as in the case of the German duelist, self-esteem and self-confidence are increased. If it detracts from the self-image, in the case of the salesman, loss of self-esteem and confidence results. When a facial disfigurement is corrected by plastic surgery, dramatic psychological changes only result if there's a corresponding correction of the mutilated self-image. Sometimes the self-image of a disfigured self persists even after successful surgery, much the same as a phantom limb may continue to feel pain years after it's been amputated. These observations led me into a new career. Some 15 years ago, I became convinced that the people who consult plastic surgeons don't need surgery at all. If I were to treat these people as patients, as a whole person rather than as merely a nose, mouth, ear, arm, or leg, I needed to be in a position to give them something more. I needed to be able to show them how to obtain a spiritual facelift, how to remove emotional scars, how to change their attitudes and thoughts as well as their physical appearance. The study has been most rewarding. Today I am more convinced than ever that what each of us really wants deep down is more life. Happiness, success, peace of mind, or whatever your own conception of supreme good may be, is experienced in its own essence as more life. When we experience expansive emotions of happiness, self-confidence, and success, we enjoy more life. And to the degree that we inhibit our abilities, frustrate our God-given talents, and allow ourselves to suffer anxiety, fear, and self-condemnation and self-hate, we literally choke off the life force available to us and turn our back upon the gift which our Creator has made. To the degree we deny the gift of life, we embrace death. Your program for better living. In my opinion, psychology during the past 30 years has become far too pessimistic regarding man and his potential for change and greatness. Since psychologists and psychiatrists deal with so-called abnormal people, the literature is almost exclusively taken up with man's various abnormalities, tendencies towards self-destruction. Many people, I'm afraid, read too much into this type of thing and came to regard themselves as things of hatred, came to regard such things as hatred, the destructive instinct, guilt, self-condemnation, and all other negatives as normal behavior. Yeah, 100%. In our culture today, this is, I think, way more pronounced than when it was even in Maxwell Maltz's time. The average person feels awfully weak and impotent when he thinks of a prospect of pitting his puny will against these negative forces in human nature in order to gain health and happiness. If this were a true picture of human nature and the human condition, self-improvement would indeed be a rather futile thing. However, I believe, and the experiences of my many patients have confirmed that fact, that you do not have to do the job alone. There is within each one of us a life instinct. This part is very important. I have this underlined, which is forever working toward health, happiness, and all that makes for more life for the individual. This life instinct works for you through what I call the creative mechanism, or when used correctly, the success mechanism built into each human being. Now, what Maxwell Maltz is talking about, and he's going to get into, is, many people from a spiritual perspective believe that is source energy, or the field, or the universal energy that flows through all things, or God, whatever you want to call it. But we're going to continue on because I like how Maxwell Maltz offers this even for people that, just from a purely psychological framework, without maybe muddying the waters, or, different people have different perspectives. So I really like how he offers it from a purely psychological perspective. New scientific insights into the subconscious mind. The new science of cybernetics has furnished us with convincing proof that the so-called subconscious mind is not a mind at all, but a mechanism, a goal-striving servo mechanism consisting of the brain and nervous system, which is used by and directed by the mind. The latest and most usable concept is that man does not have two minds, but a mind or consciousness, which operates an automatic goal-striving machine. This automatic goal-striving machine functions very similarly to the way that electronic servo mechanisms function, as far as basic principles are concerned, but it is much more marvelous, much more complex than any electronic brain or guided missiles ever conceived by man. I have all of this marked up right here. This creative mechanism within you is impersonal. It will work automatically and impersonally to achieve goals of success and happiness, or unhappiness and failure, depending upon the goals which you yourself set for it. Present it with success goals, and it functions as a success mechanism. Present it with negative goals, and it operates just as impersonally and just as faithfully as a failure mechanism. That's why I've talked about, if you have that faulty lens that you're looking at reality through, that is, distorted with this negative self-image, negative self-concept, negative beliefs, it's going to then serve you in the opposite manner. Like he says, it will serve just as faithfully as a failure mechanism. Like any other servo mechanism, it must have a clear-cut objective or a problem to work on. The goals that our creative mechanism seeks to achieve are mental images or mental pictures that we create by the use of imagination. The key goal image is our self-image. Our self-image prescribes the limits for accomplishment of any particular goals. It prescribes the area of the possible. Like any other servo mechanism, our creative mechanism works upon information and data which we feed it into our minds through our thoughts, beliefs, and interpretations. Again, our perspective, our lens. Through our attitudes and interpretations of situations, which is our perceptions, we describe the problem to be worked on. If we feed information and data into our creative mechanism to the effect that we ourselves are unworthy, inferior, undeserving, incapable, a negative self-image, this data is processed and acted upon as any other data in giving us the answer in the form of objective experience. Like any other servo mechanism, our creative mechanism makes use of stored information or memory in solving current problems and responding to current situations. Your program for getting more living out of life consists in, first of all, learning something about this creative mechanism or automatic guidance system which within you, and how to use it as a success mechanism rather than as a failure mechanism. The method itself consists in learning, practicing, and experiencing new habits of thinking, imagining, remembering, and acting in order to 1. Develop an adequate and realistic self-image, and 2. Use your creative mechanism to bring success and happiness in achieving particular goals. If you can remember, worry, or tie your shoe, you can succeed. As you will see later, the method to be used consists of creative mental picturing, creatively experiencing through your imagination, and the formation of new automatic reaction patterns by acting out and acting as if. I often tell my patients that if you can remember, worry, or tie your shoe, you will have no trouble applying this method. The things you are called upon to do are simple, but you must practice and experience. Visualizing, creative mental picturing is no more difficult than what you do when you remember some scene out of the past or worry about the future. Acting out new action patterns is no more difficult than deciding, then following through on tying your shoes in a new and different manner each morning instead of continuing to tie them in your old habitual way without thought or decision. So that concludes chapter 1. And as you can see, there's a lot to take in here. He's going to go into the act of, he mentioned autosuggestion, which is robotic affirming. He's mentioning visualizing or mental picturing with mental rehearsal. And, these are the tools that we use to influence our self-image, our self-concept, and to create that and choose what we want in our lives. So I just love how this book really leaves no room for doubt. If there's ever been any sort of kind of questioning, the validity of any of these teachings, whether it's things that Neville talks about, things that any of these teachers talk about. I mean, they talk about it from this spiritual perspective. Maxwell Maltz is talking about it from a psychological perspective, from a scientific perspective, talking about using goal-striving mechanisms. And nowadays we have AI working for, and it's like you program the AI and it goes and it retrieves the information, or it goes and it finds and it creates what it is that it's programmed to do. And we have the ability to program ourselves too. So it's a useful model, very useful model. He's going to go in further chapters talking about how we all have this success instinct. You notice that birds, how do they know how to migrate? How do they know which direction to fly in? How do they come pre-programmed with these nest building abilities? Because we all have these innate abilities, and we have this creative mechanism that he's talking about that programs us for success. Really what we've done as human beings is we've consistently, by focusing on the 3D and focusing on just outward things and being in the survival fight or flight state, being affronted, as he says all the time, by everything, we've lost sight of those instincts that are instinctual. We're born with these instincts, but we lose touch with that. And he's going to get into in the following chapters how to get back in touch with this goal striving, this success mechanism that we all have at our disposal. So thank you guys for watching very much. I'm going to keep doing these readings. I know these readings are a little bit long, but again, just like the As a Man Thinketh readings, really important foundational stuff that we're covering here. So I hope that it's useful to you. And with that being said, drop this with a like, hit me with subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.